Hello, ma'am. You said your husband was shot?
Yes.
How long ago?
Probably 10, 15 minutes ago, 10 minutes ago, maybe 15.
By whom?
My son, who was nuts. But I didn't know he was this nuts.
He had everything: wealth, privilege, an Ivy League education. And yet, in one of the most chilling betrayals imaginable, he executed the very man who gave him all of it, his own father, over an allowance. Not thousands, not millions, but $200. On January 4th, 2015, Manhattan's wealthy elite were shaken when hedge fund manager Thomas Gilbert Sr. was found dead in his Beekman Place apartment. To outsiders, it looked like a tragic suicide. The gun placed neatly on his chest, his wife Shelley returning home to the sight of her husband's lifeless body. But what she thought was despair was actually something darker, an execution staged by her own son. The killer was not a stranger in the night. It was 30-year-old Thomas Gilbert Jr., known to everyone as Tommy. A Princeton graduate raised in privilege, living off his parents in a luxury Chelsea apartment. To friends, he was handsome, aloof, obsessed with surfing and nightlife. To his parents, he was a grown man, still living like a teenager, and they were footing the bill. For years, his father had been bankrolling him with $3,000 monthly allowance on top of rent and expenses. But by 2015, patience had run out. Gilbert Sr. was tired of funding his son's empty life. That Sunday, he decided to cut the allowance by just $200. What should have been a minor financial change became the fuse for a murder. That evening, Tommy called his mother with a strange request. He asked her to leave the apartment to buy him a sandwich and a soda. It was an excuse, a way to get her out of the picture. When she left, he walked into his father's bedroom, carrying a Glock pistol in a paper bag. He raised the gun, fired a single shot into his father's head, then carefully placed the weapon on his chest. It looked like suicide, staged with cold precision. Minutes later, Shelley returned home. She dialed 911, her voice panicked and breaking. Police moved quickly. They tracked Tommy back to his Chelsea apartment. Inside, they found more than surfboards and luxury clothes. They discovered an arsenal, ammunition, handguns, illegal magazines. This wasn't a moment of rage. It was preparation. Investigators also uncovered how carefully Tommy had crafted an image. To friends, he bragged about working in finance, about investments and deals. In reality, he had no job. He spent his days surfing, working out, and living on his father's dime. The image of a brilliant hedge fund heir was nothing more than smoke and mirrors, paid for by Gilbert Sr.'s hard-earned money. The trial drew huge attention, not just for the crime itself, but for what it represented: wealth, privilege, and a son who thought he was owed everything. Prosecutors didn't waste time on excuses. They framed him as what he was: spoiled, entitled, greedy. They laid out how he staged the crime scene, how he tricked his mother into leaving. And then they dropped the detail that shocked the courtroom. He killed his father over a $200 cut to his allowance. The number was so absurd, it became unforgettable. His mother testified, sobbing on the stand, that she had been manipulated by her son, that he had asked for the sandwich and soda specifically to get her out of the apartment. The defense tried to paint him as mentally ill, bringing up past psychiatric notes, paranoia, and delusions. But the prosecution cut through it with one devastating line in closing arguments: this wasn't illness, this was entitlement. He didn't kill because he was sick. He killed because he wanted money, and his father finally told him no. The jury deliberated for just one day. In 2019, they found Thomas Gilbert Jr. guilty of second-degree murder and weapons charges. At sentencing, the judge's words left no doubt. You lived a life of privilege, and instead of gratitude, you chose destruction. You murdered the man who gave you everything. He was sentenced to 30 years to life in prison. The fallout was enormous. Among Manhattan's elite, the case became a warning. the nightmare of raising children in wealth without accountability. As of 2025, Thomas Gilbert Jr. sits in a New York prison. No trust fund, no Hamptons weekends, no image to maintain. Just a man who traded every privilege for a prison cell.
Him and Mrs. Halderson would be in the kitchen, and we would have game nights quite often. And we would also play Mario Kart together a lot. I just believe his parents were missing, and I just want them to be found.
He murdered his parents, not for money, not for inheritance, but to protect a resume that didn't even exist. Chandler Halderson was 23 years old, living in Windsor, Wisconsin with his parents, Bart and Krista. To everyone who knew him, he was the golden son, a college student studying renewable energy engineering, working at an insurance company, even bragging about an internship with SpaceX. His parents believed he was destined for greatness, but it was all a lie. In reality, Chandler had dropped out of Madison Area Technical College after just one semester. He never earned a degree. He never had a job. He never came close to SpaceX. Every credential, every story, every accomplishment he told his family was fabricated. He faked transcripts. He forged emails. He staged texts from bosses. At home, he pretended to work remotely while actually playing video games. When his parents asked for proof, Chandler invented more lies. He told them he couldn't keep up with work because of a traumatic brain injury from falling down the stairs. He claimed he was going through physical therapy. He staged appointments. All of it was fake. By the summer of 2021, Bart and Krista had reached their breaking point. Bart started calling schools and employers himself. The walls were closing in. Chandler knew once the lies unraveled, the illusion of his perfect life would collapse.
Hi, I'm trying to get an appointment scheduled to meet with somebody to mainly just get a copy of the transcript, other degree verification.
IT classes, right? I don't see that you were in a program. But I don't see that you were admitted in any program.
On July 1st, 2021, Bart confronted his son at home. Moments later, Chandler shot his father in the back. Hours later, Krista returned home, expecting to find her husband and son, and instead walked into her own execution. A mother who adored her child was killed in her living room by the very son she raised. But murder wasn't enough. Chandler dismembered their bodies using tools from the garage and scattered them across rural Wisconsin. He dumped parts of Bart in a farm ditch. He left Krista's remains by the Wisconsin River. He burned others in a friend's fire pit. For days, he drove around with coolers in his car, transporting the mutilated remains. And still, he lied. He texted their phones after killing them, writing, "Hope the cabin is fun." He told friends and neighbors that his parents had gone to their lake cabin for the 4th of July. He played the role of a worried son, even inviting his girlfriend over while bleach filled the basement air. But Chandler's cover-up was sloppy. Neighbors noticed him using their fire pit and complained about the smell. Farmers reported him lurking around their land. Investigators found blood soaking the Halderson basement floor. His iPhone betrayed him too. GPS data placed him at every single dump site. Snapchat logs proved he wasn't where he claimed. When police brought him in, Chandler admitted some lies. He confessed he wasn't in college, didn't have a job, never worked at SpaceX. But he denied killing his parents, even with their blood in his basement. Even with GPS mapping his every move, he insisted he was innocent. The trial in 2022 stripped everything away. Prosecutors presented him as a narcissistic liar who murdered his parents to keep his fantasy world alive. In court, they showed the fake transcripts, the forged job offers, the fake SpaceX resume. They laid out the timeline, Bart confronting him, Krista walking into her death, and Chandler's attempt to erase them both. The courtroom had chilling moments. His girlfriend testified that he tried to rope her into the cover-up, asking her to help pick up bags and cleaning supplies. And jurors watched Chandler's blank face as photos of his parents' remains were shown. The prosecution's closing line drove it home. He didn't kill them for money. He didn't kill them for revenge. He killed them because his lies were about to be exposed, and he valued those lies more than their lives. It took the jury just 2 hours. Chandler Halderson was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree intentional homicide, mutilation of a corpse, and hiding a corpse. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. At sentencing, the judge told him, "You murdered the very people who gave you everything, and you did it all to protect nothing but a lie." As of 2025, Chandler Halderson sits in prison, stripped of the fantasy he once lived inside. Online, his case went viral. The absurdity of murdering your parents to protect a fake resume shocked audiences around the world. He became a dark meme of modern entitlement, the SpaceX intern who never existed.
I break my heart. I lose my brother, I lose my 4th family member. I lose my niece, very lovely niece, and my sister-in-law, and my auntie. I can't imagine my brother is still not here. I saw his body, but still I can't believe it.
He wasn't a career criminal. He wasn't a hardened killer. He was a quiet 23-year-old gamer living in his parents' basement in Markham, Ontario. And yet, one July afternoon in 2019, he wiped out his entire family, his grandmother, his mother, his sister, and finally, his father. Not for money, not for revenge, but because he had built his life on lies, and he couldn't face the truth. His name was Menendez Zaman. To his family, Menendez was the perfect son. He told them he was enrolled at York University, studying engineering, and was only weeks away from graduation. His parents planned a party. His grandmother prayed for him every night. His sister encouraged him. His father, a hard-working factory employee, told friends he was proud his son would soon be an engineer. But every bit of it was a lie. In reality, Menendez had dropped out years earlier. He spent his days in the basement, gaming, sleeping, and drifting. When friends asked where he was, he'd claim to be studying or at labs. When his parents pressed him, he invented fake assignments and deadlines. He even told some people he was preparing for graduate school. His entire adult life was a performance built on air. By July 2019, graduation day was approaching. His family was expecting invitations, a degree, and a future. Menendez realized his cover story couldn't last. Exposure was coming. Instead of telling the truth, he decided to erase it, and them entirely. On July 27th, 2019, his family returned from mosque one by one. His grandmother, Firoza Begum, entered first. He attacked and killed her immediately. Soon after, his mother, Mamotaz, came home still dressed in her prayer clothes, carrying groceries for dinner. She walked into her own home expecting warmth and was executed by the son she loved. Hours later, his sister Melissa returned and was murdered too. Finally, when his father Monia came back from work, exhausted from a long shift, Menendez killed him as well. And then came the most shocking twist. Instead of hiding his crimes, Menendez logged onto Discord, the gaming chat platform where he spent most of his life. There, in a small chat room, he confessed in real time. "I just slaughtered my entire family," he typed. At first, his online friends laughed it off as dark humor, but as his posts continued, the truth became chilling. He explained his motive. "I couldn't have lived knowing my family saw what a failure I was." When some users still doubted him, he posted photos, images of his murdered family members, uploaded into a gaming chat as if they were trophies. Finally, someone called York Regional Police. When officers arrived at the Zenon home, the doors were locked. They forced their way in and discovered the nightmare Menendez had described. He didn't resist. He admitted to the murders on the spot. The story spread instantly. A family annihilation is rare, but one confessed online in real time to strangers? It was unprecedented. Screenshots of his Discord messages went viral across Reddit, Twitter, and true crime forums. Overnight, Menendez became infamous as the Discord killer. At trial, prosecutors emphasized the sheer selfishness. His family had sacrificed everything to give him a future. His mother prayed for him, cooked for him, believed in him, and he cut her down carrying groceries through her front door. Menendez pled guilty to 4 counts of first-degree murder. In court, Discord logs were read aloud, word for word, to the stunned gallery. Prosecutors called it cowardice, the ultimate act of selfishness. When given a chance to speak, Menendez offered a hollow apology. "I am sorry for the pain I've caused." But the judge wasn't moved. He sentenced Menendez to life in prison with no parole for 40 years, one of the harshest sentences available in Canada. In the Bangladeshi Canadian community, grief turned to disbelief. Relatives described it as a betrayal beyond comprehension. As of 2025, Menendez remains in prison. He has no degree, no career, no family, just the title he gave himself, a failure and a murderer.
It's not an emergency, just it kind of is. Just someone had a party tonight, and someone reported that this kid had killed their parents.
He killed his parents and then threw a party. In July 2011, 17-year-old Tyler Hadley bludgeoned his mother and father to death inside their Port St. Lucie, Florida home. Hours later, he opened the door to a crowd of classmates, turned the music up, and acted like nothing had happened. Red cups, beer, and laughter filled the house where his parents, Blake and Mary Jo, lay dead behind a locked bedroom door. Tyler wasn't a hardened adult. He was a high school kid, spiraling. Friends said he'd become withdrawn and erratic, desperate to be noticed. He was abusing drugs, skipping classes, talking bigger than he ever acted. In the weeks leading up to the murders, he told multiple people a version of the same line. He was going to kill his parents and then throw a party. Most brushed it off as shot talk. Teenagers say crazy things all the time. But Tyler wasn't bluffing. He had already started planning. On the afternoon of July 16th, Mary Jo sat at the family computer. Tyler came up behind her with a hammer from the garage. When Blake heard the struggle and rushed in, Tyler turned the weapon on him too. No break-in, no intruder, just a son who made their home the scene of their deaths. He dragged both bodies into the master bedroom, pulled towels and household items over them, pushed furniture on top, and locked the door. He tried to scrub away what he could. Then he did the most brazen thing imaginable. He posted on Facebook, "Party at my house. Don't tell anyone." The message spread through Port St. Lucie like a spark hitting dry grass. As the sun set, cars began to line the street. Some kids said Tyler told them to park away from the house so neighbors wouldn't notice. By nightfall, the place was packed. Estimates ran as high as 60 teenagers. The carpet got ground with food, sticky beer, and footprints. And under all of that noise and chaos was the secret behind the locked master bedroom door. Guests noticed details that didn't fit. Family photos were missing from the walls. A heavy, unpleasant smell seemed to hang in the air. Tyler drifted from room to room, jittery and wired. When asked where his parents were, he said they were out of town, or sleeping, or just not here. The answers kept changing. At one point, in the kitchen, Tyler told a small circle the truth. He had killed his parents. Most laughed. It sounded like a sick joke designed to get attention, but he pulled a close friend aside and brought him to the master bedroom. The door was locked. Inside, beneath piles of household debris, lay the reality no one at that party was prepared to face. The friend left in shock and kept quiet until morning. The party raged on. By the next day, the rumors were no longer rumors. A tip reached police. Officers arrived to find the aftermath of a rager. Red cups stacked in corners, bottles everywhere, ashtrays overflowing. But the smell told them this was more than a mess. They forced the master bedroom door and found Blake and Mary Jo exactly where Tyler had left them. He was arrested at the scene without a fight. Investigators pieced together premeditation. Tyler had told multiple friends beforehand. He had talked online about doing something big. He had taken ecstasy the day of the murders, trying to give himself the nerve. The timeline was merciless. In court, prosecutors called it exactly what it was: calculated. They played Tyler's own digital trail, the Facebook invite, the messages, the witness accounts from the party. They brought in the friend who saw the bedroom and listened as he described the moment the joke stopped being a joke. The state's picture was simple and devastating. A son who decided attention mattered more than the lives of the two people who loved him most. The defense pointed to his age, depression, and drug use. They argued he was an unstable teenager, not a mastermind. But jurors had already heard enough. In 2014, Tyler Hadley was sentenced to 2 life terms without parole. After changes to juvenile sentencing law, he was resentenced to life with a review after 25 years, a technical change that didn't soften the facts. The judge told Tyler, "You showed no remorse. You slaughtered the 2 people who loved you most, and then you celebrated." As the years passed, the party itself became a ghost that followed the people who attended it. Many are adults now, still talking about the sight of overturned furniture, the strange way Tyler kept checking the hallway, the uneasy feeling no one could name until it was too late. As of 2025, Tyler sits in prison. There is no music, no crowd, no spotlight, just the fact that will never change. A mother at her computer, a father running to help, both betrayed by their son in their own home.
I don't see any potential rehabilitation of Mr. Guy. He showed absolutely no remorse. Quite frankly, Mr. Guy, you look like you're kind of proud of what you have accomplished. I think we could have 500 years to try to rehabilitate Mr. Guy and be unsuccessful.
Thanksgiving is supposed to be a time for family, a time for parents and children to gather around the table, share a meal, and be grateful for one another. But in 2016, one family's holiday ended in one of the most calculated and gruesome parricides in modern American history. The killer wasn't a stranger. It wasn't an intruder. It was their own son, Joel Michael Guy Jr. Joel Jr. was 28 years old, unemployed, and still financially dependent on his parents. His father, Joel Sr., had worked as a pipeline engineer. His mother, Lisa, was a human resources accounts manager. Together, they had spent their lives supporting their only son. They paid his bills, funded his lifestyle, and kept him afloat. But by Thanksgiving 2016, they had made a decision. It was time to cut him off. That holiday weekend, Joel Jr. drove from his apartment in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, to his parents' home in Knoxville, Tennessee. They thought they were welcoming their son home for Thanksgiving. In reality, they were inviting in their killer. Because Joel Jr. hadn't just thought about killing them, he had planned it in excruciating detail. Investigators would later find a notebook in his bedroom, a journal prosecutors called the Book of Premeditation. Inside, Joel had written step-by-step instructions for murder. He wrote about ambushing his father, about making his mother come home later so she could be attacked separately, about using chemicals to dissolve their bodies. His handwriting laid it out like a recipe. On Saturday, November 26th, Joel Sr. was attacked in the exercise room of the house. Joel Jr. stabbed him dozens of times in a frenzied assault. The father, who had worked to provide for him for nearly 3 decades, was left dead on the floor of his own home. Hours later, Lisa Guy returned from a shopping trip. She carried groceries into the kitchen, dinner for her family still in her hands, and instead found her own death. But Joel didn't stop at murder. Following his book of premeditation, he began dismembering their bodies. He used sharp tools to separate limbs, then placed body parts in chemical-filled tubs in the bathroom. Police later called it a house of horrors. When investigators entered, they found chemicals bubbling in the bathroom and the overwhelming smell of bleach, decay, and chemicals mixed together. He had even calculated the time it would take for the bodies to dissolve. He wasn't acting out of sudden rage. He was following instructions he had written for himself. And while this nightmare brewed inside the home, Joel Jr. was captured on surveillance cameras, injured during the killings. He had cut his hands badly, so he drove to a Walmart. The footage shows him calmly walking the pharmacy aisle, buying bandages, ointment, and peroxide. That contrast chilled jurors more than anything. What stopped him wasn't conscience, it was suspicion. When Lisa didn't show up for work on Monday, her employer called police. They knew she was reliable. Her absence was alarming. Joel Michael Guy Jr. was arrested shortly after. At trial, prosecutors painted him as cold, entitled, and heartless. He hadn't worked a job in his life, they said. He relied on his parents' money to survive. When they finally decided to cut him off, his response wasn't independence. It was annihilation. The book of premeditation was read aloud in court, line by line. Joel Jr. sat, expressionless, through it all. The evidence was overwhelming. In 2020, he was convicted on 2 counts of first-degree murder, abuse of a corpse, and felony murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. At sentencing, the judge described the case as one of the most shocking in Tennessee history. He said Joel Jr.'s parents had given him everything, and his response was the ultimate act of selfishness. As of 2025, Joel Michael Guy Jr. remains in prison. His name has become synonymous with calculated betrayal. The details of his book of premeditation and the horrifying crime scene still circulate in documentaries, true crime specials, and court files. A father who worked decades to provide, a mother who came home with groceries, expecting warmth, both betrayed, dismembered, and dissolved by the son they raised.
My father was my best friend in many, many ways. No matter what I did, people made a lot more of it out of it than it really was. They said that we were always fighting. I would never fight with my father.
Before it became the backdrop of horror movies and ghost stories, the house at 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville, New York, was the scene of a real massacre. On the night of November 13th, 1974, 23-year-old Ronald Butch DeFeo Jr. picked up a rifle and murdered his parents and 4 siblings as they slept. 6 members of one household executed in a single night by the son they trusted most. To outsiders, the DeFeos looked like the picture-perfect family. Ronald Sr. was a successful car dealer who prided himself on providing. His wife Louise raised their 5 children in a large Dutch colonial home on Long Island, the kind of house that symbolized security and achievement. But inside those walls, the family dynamic was toxic. Ronald Sr. was domineering and violent. He demanded obedience from his children and often clashed with his oldest son. Ronald Jr. was volatile in his own right, drinking heavily, using heroin, and lashing out in anger. Neighbors and friends recalled shouting matches between father and son. Butch often stormed out of the house, only to return when he needed money. Despite his self-destructive spiral, his parents continued to support him financially. By November 1974, that pressure cooker of resentment, addiction, and dependency finally erupted. In the early morning hours, Butch retrieved his father's Marlin .35 caliber rifle. He went first to his parents' bedroom, shooting Ronald Sr. and Louise as they slept. He then moved through the house in silence, executing his siblings one by one. Each was found lying face down in their beds, as though arranged. The crime scene stunned detectives. 6 victims killed with a loud rifle, yet no one seemed to wake or struggle. No neighbors reported hearing the blasts. Officers later said, walking into the house felt like walking into a nightmare, row after row of bodies. Later that morning, Ronald tried to play the role of the shocked survivor. He walked into a local bar and shouted, "You've got to help me. I think my parents have been shot." Friends rushed back with him to the house. Police soon followed, stepping into the silent house and uncovering the massacre. At first, DeFeo insisted his family had been killed by a mob hitman, but detectives noticed his story shifting every time he repeated it. His behavior was off, his emotions rehearsed. Within a day, under questioning, he broke. His words were chilling. "Once I started, I just couldn't stop. It went so fast." The trial in 1975 became a national spectacle. His defense argued he was insane, claiming he heard voices commanding him to kill. Psychiatrists testified that he suffered from paranoid schizophrenia. Prosecutors countered with a simpler story: an angry addict who murdered out of rage and greed. They pointed to his violent history with his father, his heroin abuse, and the life insurance money he expected to gain. The jury rejected the insanity plea. Ronald DeFeo Jr. was convicted on 6 counts of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 25 years to life for each count. 6 stacked life sentences. But the story of Amityville didn't end in the courtroom. In 1975, George and Kathy Lutz bought the house at 112 Ocean Avenue. They moved in with their children and lasted only 28 days before fleeing. They claimed the house was haunted by the murdered family's spirits. Their account became the Amityville Horror, a best-selling book and then a series of films. Overnight, the DeFeo massacre was overshadowed by ghost stories and Hollywood. For decades, debates raged about whether the hauntings were real. But beneath the myths was the undeniable reality. 6 people were betrayed in their own home by someone they trusted most. From prison, DeFeo's story shifted again and again. Sometimes, he claimed his sister Dawn killed some of the family, and he killed her in retaliation. Other times, he blamed his mother. At other points, he returned to the claim that voices commanded him. The details changed, but the outcome never did. In March 2021, at the age of 69, Ronald DeFeo Jr. died in prison. Nearly 5 decades after the crime, his name remained a symbol of one of the worst family betrayals in American history.
Sorry, I never told you all I wanted to say.
On July 10th, 2001, in the Sydney suburb of North Ryde, a respectable family home became the site of one of Australia's most infamous crimes. Inside, 20-year-old Sef Gonzalez murdered his father, his mother, and his younger sister. It wasn't a sudden explosion of anger. It was deliberate, premeditated, and committed for the coldest reason of all. To their neighbors, the Gonzalez family was a success story. Teddy and Mary were Filipino immigrants who had worked hard to give their children a stable life. They lived in a well-kept home, valued education, and were respected in their community. Their daughter, Claudine, was just 18, bright and full of promise. Their son, Sef, was supposed to be the family's pride, studying law, destined for success. But it was all a lie. By 2001, Sef had failed out of university. He hid his academic collapse from his parents, fabricating grades and forging his future out of lies. His entire image as the model son was a facade. He knew if his parents discovered the truth, their support, both emotional and financial, would collapse. Instead of admitting failure, he began planning something unthinkable. That July night, Sef acted. He targeted his father first. Teddy had worked tirelessly to provide for his family, but his own son stabbed him to death inside the home he had built. Minutes later, Mary returned, arms still loaded with groceries, bringing dinner into the house. She expected warmth. Instead, she was cut down by the son she loved. Finally, Sef turned on Claudine. She was ambushed in her bedroom, still wearing her school uniform, still just a teenager with her future ahead of her. 3 family members slaughtered in their own home. But the murders were only half of Sef's plan. He tried to twist the story. With their blood still drying, he grabbed spray paint and scrawled racial slurs on the walls. He staged the killings to look like a hate crime, hoping detectives would chase phantom attackers. Then he went into full performance mode. He wept in front of relatives. He told friends he was devastated. He appeared on television, pleading for information about the killers. He presented himself as the grieving son, the last survivor of a racist attack. But the sympathy was fake. Detectives saw through him quickly. His story kept changing. He had no injuries that would suggest a struggle. Forensic evidence revealed the graffiti had been sprayed after the murders. The supposed hate crime was a hoax. His performance collapsed under scrutiny. The investigation then exposed his motive. Police uncovered his academic failures. He had dropped out, lied for years, and constructed a fragile life on forgeries. His parents would soon learn the truth. By killing them, he thought he could escape humiliation and secure his inheritance. With his family gone, he would control their assets, the home, the money, the estate. At trial, prosecutors dismantled the illusion. They presented the evidence, the sequence of stabbings, the staged graffiti, the public crocodile tears. Witnesses testified about his unnervingly calm behavior after the murders. Jurors saw the footage of his fake television appeals, knowing he was the killer the entire time. The betrayal hit hardest with his sister. Prosecutors reminded the jury that Claudine had trusted him as her older brother, and he had turned that trust into the ultimate betrayal. The jury returned a guilty verdict. In 2004, Sef Gonzalez was sentenced to life in prison without parole. The judge called his actions selfish beyond imagination, condemning him for murdering not only his parents, but also his sister, whose only crime was trusting him. But the story didn't stop with his sentencing. Sef has continued to fight from behind bars. Over the years, he filed multiple appeals, challenging his conviction and sentence. Each attempt failed. Yet in 2025, nearly a quarter century later, he lodged another appeal, dragging his family's name back into headlines once again. Teddy and Mary worked their entire lives for their children. Claudine was a teenager, with her whole future ahead of her. All 3 were destroyed in one night by the son and brother they loved most.
I just wanted to be famous.
Going to make my first skit soon. Can't show you a sneak preview or it would ruin it. It's going to be some good stuff. I think it's going to be hilarious.
Hello?
My brother's attacking my family.
Your dad is attacking your family?
No, my brother.
In July 2015, Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, was shattered by one of the most disturbing family massacres in American history. 2 teenage brothers, 18-year-old Robert Bever and 16-year-old Michael, turned their knives on their parents and their siblings. 5 family members died, 2 survived, and the motive wasn't money or desperation. It was darker. The brothers wanted to be worshipped like the mass killers they idolized, even if it meant killing their baby sister. The Bever family was unusual, even before the murders. Parents David and April homeschooled all 7 children and kept them isolated from outsiders. Neighbors rarely saw the kids playing outside. Behind closed doors, Robert and Michael grew up cut off from the world, spending endless hours online. What they consumed wasn't normal teenage entertainment. It was violent videos, forums about mass shootings, and idol worship of the Columbine killers. That obsession turned into ambition. Robert and Michael didn't want ordinary lives. They wanted infamy. They wrote about how they would surpass Columbine, killing hundreds of people. Their plan began at home. They would slaughter their family as the opening act, then steal a car, arm themselves with guns and ammunition, and launch a nationwide killing spree that would make their names unforgettable. For months they prepared. They stockpiled knives, tactical gear, and survival equipment. They drew up lists and fantasized about how many they would kill. In their minds, their parents and siblings weren't family, they were practice. On the night of July 22nd, they struck. Their father, David, was stabbed dozens of times. Their mother, April, tried to fight back, but Michael attacked her until she collapsed. Then, they turned on their siblings. But not every child died. Crystal, their 13-year-old sister, was stabbed multiple times, but refused to give up. She reached a phone and dialed 911. In a whisper, she told the operator that her brothers were killing everyone. That call saved her life and exposed the massacre. When police arrived minutes later, the house was silent. Officers entered cautiously, moving room to room through the blood-soaked halls. They found Crystal, clinging to life. They found Autumn, just 2 years old, unharmed in her crib. And in the garage, they found Robert and Michael, covered in blood, still holding knives. The investigation revealed just how deliberate the attack was. Police uncovered documents on their computers, detailing months of planning. They had written about their dream of surpassing Columbine, about how the massacre would launch their infamy. Their family was meant to be the beginning of something much bigger. When questioned, Robert admitted he had wanted to kill since childhood. He described the murders as part of a destiny and spoke with pride. Michael, though younger, admitted his role without hesitation. Neither showed remorse. In court, prosecutors exposed the full betrayal. They played Crystal's 9/11 call. Her testimony became the most powerful weapon against them. Robert was convicted and sentenced to 5 life sentences without parole. Michael, tried as an adult, was given 5 consecutive life terms. Both will die in prison. The Bever house itself became too painful for the community to look at. For years it sat abandoned, a haunting reminder of the massacre. Neighbors demanded it be torn down. Eventually, it was demolished and replaced with a memorial park for the victims: David, April, Daniel, Christopher, and Victoria. A place of mourning built where a home once stood. For the survivors, life will never be the same. Crystal carries scars inside and out from that night. Autumn, the youngest, grew up without parents, without 4 of her siblings, knowing only that her 2 brothers destroyed her family for fame. They wanted to be legends. Instead, they became monsters, remembered forever not for greatness, but for the slaughter of their own family. In August 1985, a quiet farmhouse in rural Essex, England, became the site of one of the most chilling family massacres in British history. Inside White House Farm, 5 people were murdered: a father, a mother, a daughter, and her 6-year-old twin sons. The killer wasn't a stranger breaking in. It wasn't an intruder in the night. It was their own son, 24-year-old Jeremy Bamber. Jeremy had been adopted by Neville and June Bamber, a couple who gave him everything. They raised him in wealth, sent him to good schools, and brought him into a life of stability and privilege. He lived on White House Farm, an estate that symbolized success and legacy. But Jeremy didn't see it as a home. He saw it as something to inherit. He resented the control of his parents, resented the discipline, and wanted the freedom that came with money. He didn't want to wait for it. He wanted it now. On the night of August 6, 1985, his plan came to life. When police entered White House Farm in the early hours of the morning, they found a scene that at first looked like a murder-suicide. Neville and June were dead. Sheila, Jeremy's sister, lay on the floor with a rifle nearby. And upstairs, her 6-year-old twins, Daniel and Nicholas, were found shot in their beds. A gun was next to Sheila, who had struggled for years with mental illness. It seemed plausible that she had killed her parents, killed her children, and then turned the gun on herself. And that's exactly what Jeremy wanted them to believe. In the hours after the killings, he played the part of the devastated son. He told police his father had phoned him in the night, panicked, saying Sheila had gone berserk with a gun. He told reporters his family was everything to him. He presented himself as the lone survivor of a family tragedy. For a short while, the story held. But then the cracks appeared. Forensic evidence began to raise questions. Sheila's wounds didn't match the position of the weapon. The rifle had been wiped down. And the phone call Jeremy swore his father had made that night? Records proved no such call was ever placed. Investigators started to look closer. Then came the silencer. In a cupboard, relatives later discovered a sound suppressor with traces of blood inside. Forensic experts said it had been used in the shootings. And crucially, with the silencer attached, the rifle was too long for Sheila to have shot herself. The supposed murder-suicide collapsed. It hadn't been Sheila. It had been staged. Police turned their focus to Jeremy. His alibi was weak. His behavior after the murders raised eyebrows. While pretending to mourn, he bragged about money he expected to inherit. He bought expensive clothes, spent freely, and acted as if White House Farm was already his. His girlfriend testified that weeks before the killings, he had spoken openly about wanting to wipe out his family. He even told her he could make it look like Sheila had done it. At trial in 1986, prosecutors laid it out clearly. Jeremy Bamber executed his parents, his sister, and her 2 young children to inherit the estate. He then staged the scene to frame Sheila, exploiting her mental illness to cover his crime. His motive wasn't rage or desperation. It was greed, pure and simple. The jury took less than a day. Jeremy Bamber was convicted of 5 counts of murder and sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. The judge called him cold, calculating, and utterly without remorse. But even behind bars, Jeremy didn't give up his performance. For nearly 4 decades, he has claimed innocence, insisting Sheila was the killer. He has filed appeal after appeal, launching campaigns to overturn his conviction. Each one has failed. In 2025, Britain's Criminal Cases Review Commission rejected his latest attempt, ruling that the evidence still firmly proves his guilt. The case has lived on in documentaries, books, and endless debate. Some point to early police mistakes, items missed at the crime scene, evidence handled poorly, as reasons to doubt the verdict. But no amount of spin erases the core facts: the staged murder-suicide, the fabricated phone call, the silencer that made Sheila's suicide impossible, and Jeremy's own words about wanting his family gone.
My dad had been molesting me.
What did your mom say?
She told me to stop it, and that I was exaggerating, and that my dad has to punish me when I do things wrong.
In August 1989, Beverly Hills police walked into one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in America and found a crime scene that would dominate headlines for decades. Inside a $5 million mansion, Jose and Kitty Menendez were dead, executed by their own sons. The killers weren't strangers, weren't intruders, but their heirs, Lyle, 21, and Eric, 18. What followed wasn't just a trial. It became one of the most infamous family murder cases in history. A story of wealth, abuse, greed, and betrayal that still sparks debate nearly 40 years later. Jose Menendez embodied the immigrant's success story. A Cuban refugee, he worked his way up to become a powerful entertainment executive, providing his family with privilege and security. Kitty, once a school teacher, had given up her career to raise their sons. She struggled with depression and unhappiness, but her devotion to Lyle and Eric was clear. To the outside world, the Menendez family was living the American dream: private schools, tennis lessons, expensive cars, and a mansion in Beverly Hills. But behind the gates, tension was boiling. On the night of August 20th, 1989, that tension erupted into bloodshed. Jose and Kitty were sitting in the den watching television when their sons entered with shotguns. Jose was shot in the back of the head. Kitty tried to run, but was cornered and gunned down. By the time it was over, both parents were dead on the carpet of their own living room. The brothers then staged their cover story. They ditched the guns, drove around to create an alibi, and finally returned home to call 911 in panicked voices. At first, police believed them. To detectives, the Menendez brothers were traumatized sons, not suspects. But their behavior in the days that followed raised questions. Instead of retreating into grief, they indulged. Lyle bought a Rolex, a Porsche, and even a restaurant. Eric spent on luxury clothes, international trips, and a tennis coach. Within weeks, they had blown through hundreds of thousands of dollars of their parents' money. Prosecutors later said the spree revealed the truth. The motive wasn't fear, it was greed. For months, suspicion hovered, but no charges came. Then came the break. Eric confessed during a session with his psychologist, admitting the murders. The confession leaked, and in March 1990, both brothers were arrested. Their trials became national theater. The prosecution's argument was direct. Niall and Eric murdered their parents to inherit their fortune. The spending spree, the staged 9/11 core, the deliberate execution, it all pointed to cold-blooded greed. But the defense strategy was unprecedented. They didn't deny the killings. Instead, they claimed the brothers acted out of terror. They alleged years of emotional, physical, and sexual abuse by their father, Jose. They said Kitty knew but ignored it. According to their attorneys, the murders weren't about inheritance. They were acts of survival by sons who believed they were about to be killed themselves. The first trial, televised in the early 1990s, split America in half. Some saw spoiled rich kids destroying the very people who gave them everything. Others saw traumatized young men finally lashing out at an abusive father. The case became a media obsession, played out like a soap opera, with millions tuning in daily. In the end, the jury deadlocked, and the trial ended in a mistrial. But the second trial in 1995 was different. The judge sharply restricted the abuse testimony, keeping the focus on hard evidence. Jurors were reminded of the staged crime scene, the fabricated 911 call, the wild spending spree. Without the emotional weight of abuse dominating the narrative, the case turned. The brothers were convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. The Menendez case didn't end there. It became a cultural landmark. Documentaries, TV dramatizations, and endless debate kept their names alive. The question, greedy killers or victims of abuse, never went away. In 2018, after decades apart, the brothers were finally reunited in the same prison, prompting another wave of public sympathy. On social media, younger audiences discovered the case and began trending hashtags calling for a retrial, recasting the brothers as victims rather than villains. In 2025, their legal teams continue to push for resentencing or parole hearings. So far, courts have denied them. But the very fact that their names still dominate headlines nearly 4 decades later proves how deeply their case resonates. And that's why the Menendez brothers are remembered as the most infamous of all. It wasn't just the act of parricide. It was the national spectacle that followed, the narrative tug-of-war between greed and abuse, between spoiled sons and damaged victims. From the heir who murdered over an allowance, to the brothers who turned their family home into a massacre, these 10 stories represent the ultimate betrayal of the parental bond. They are the children who destroyed their own bloodlines, the sons who should have carried their families forward, but instead tore them apart. Their crimes leave a scar on the very idea of trust between parent and child. They are, without question, among the most evil sons in prison today. If you found this exploration into these shocking cases compelling, please hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. Share your thoughts on these stories in the comments below. Which case do you think was the most disturbing betrayal?